The crack of AK-47 fire split the morning air like thunder. I pressed myself flat against the scorching sand behind a concrete barrier, heart pounding, not from the bullets but from the email burning bright on my satellite phone screen. Master Sergeant Mitchell, we got movement 3 o'clock. That was Rodriguez, my youngest squad member. Kid was 22, same age I was when I first deployed. Now 35 years later, with silver threading through what was left of my hair, I should have been thinking about retirement parties and fishing trips. Instead, I was reading words that made my blood run colder than any Taliban ambush ever could. Jim, you need to know this. Your sister Linda just sold your parents' house. Moving trucks came this morning. Thought you should hear it from a friend. Bill, the house. Our house. The one Dad built with his own hands after coming back from Korea, where Mom raised 4 kids and baked apple pies every Sunday. Where 70 years of Mitchell family history lived in every creaking floorboard and painted wall. Sergeant, you hit? Rodriguez was shaking my shoulder. I'm good, I managed, though nothing about this was good. Just processing some intel from home. Another burst of gunfire rattled overhead. 47 degrees Celsius in this Afghan hellhole, and I felt ice forming in my veins. How could Linda sell the house? Mom and Dad's will was crystal clear. Everything split equally between us. She didn't have the authority, didn't have the right, didn't have the goddamn legal standing to incoming RPG. Training kicked in. I rolled left, pulled Rodriguez down with me. The rocket exploded 20 meters out, showering us with dirt and fragments. A piece of shrapnel caught my left shoulder, tearing through my uniform. Blood started seeping through, mixing with the dust and sweat. But all I could think about was Linda. Little Linda with her gap-toothed smile, who used to beg me to push her on that old rope swing Dad hung from the oak tree. Linda who cried for 3 hours straight when I first enlisted, wrapping her 8-year-old arms around my legs and making me promise I'd always come home. Promise you'll come back, Jimmy. Promise you'll always come back to us. The irony tasted bitter as blood in my mouth. I'd kept that promise through 5 deployments, 2 Purple Hearts, and more close calls than I could count. Survived Fallujah, Kandahar, and every hellish firebase in between. Always came back. And while I was here, bleeding in the dirt, protecting strangers' freedom 8,000 miles from Pennsylvania, my own sister was stealing our heritage. Medevac inbound, 2 minutes. Someone was wrapping gauze around my shoulder. The world started spinning, going gray at the edges. No, not now. I forced myself to focus, pulled up memories like ammunition against the spreading darkness. Dad in 1975. Paint splattered on his hands as he touched up the white picket fence. Son, he'd said, that gravelly voice full of pride. This house isn't just wood and nails. It's the Mitchell Fortress. No matter what happens out there in the world, this is home. This is what we fight for. Mom in her sunflower apron standing on the porch, waving us in for dinner. The smell of fresh-baked bread floating through the summer air. Come on, you two. Supper's getting cold. The helicopter blades were beating overhead now, kicking up a sandstorm. They loaded me onto a stretcher, and I clutched that phone like a lifeline. Like if I held it tight enough I could reach through it and grab Linda by the shoulders, shake her until she explained what the hell she'd done. 48 hours, I muttered to the medic leaning over me. 48 hours until retirement. I was almost home free. You're gonna be fine, Sergeant. Just a flesh wound. But he didn't understand. The shrapnel in my shoulder was nothing compared to the knife Linda had just planted in my back. As the morphine kicked in and consciousness started slipping away, one thought crystallized sharp as a diamond in my mind. Linda had better have a damn good explanation. Because the Mitchell family fortress didn't fall to enemy fire. It fell to betrayal from within. And that was a wound that wouldn't heal with bandages and time. The phone slipped from my fingers as darkness closed in. The email still glowing on the blood-stained screen. My last thought before everything went black was a whisper, a prayer, and a promise all rolled into one. Linda, what have you done? The C-17's engines roared as we descended toward Dover Air Force Base. 48 hours since that email. 48 hours of morphine haze and fever dreams where Linda's 8-year-old face kept morphing into something I didn't recognize. My shoulder throbbed under the field dressing, but that pain was nothing compared to the documents spread across my lap. Marcus Chen had sent them to my secure military email. Good old Marcus. We'd served together in Iraq, and now he was running a law firm in Philadelphia. When I'd called him from the field hospital in Bagram, his voice had gone quiet in that way that meant lawyers saw trouble coming. Jim, this is worse than you think, he'd said. Just read everything, then come see me before you do anything stupid. Now, 30,000 feet above American soil, I understood why. Linda hadn't just sold the house. She'd declared me killed in action. The death certificate was right there in black and white, dated 3 weeks ago. Some hack doctor's signature authorizing it. My signature? No, a pathetic forgery of my signature on a power of attorney form. And the sale documents? Jesus Christ, the sale documents. $400,000. That's all she'd gotten for a house worth $1.2 million. 3 generations of Mitchell sweat and memories, sold for pennies on the dollar to something called BHL Properties. Sir, we're beginning our descent. Need you to buckle up. The flight attendant's voice snapped me back. I folded the papers carefully, methodically, the way you'd fold a flag at a military funeral. Each crease felt like drawing battle lines. Marcus's office was on the 25th floor of a gleaming Philadelphia high-rise. When I walked in, still in my dusty ACUs with my arm in a sling, his secretary's eyes went wide. He's expecting me, I said, and she just nodded, probably wondering if I was some kind of ghost. Marcus stood when I entered, all 5'8" of him in his $1,000 suit. But I saw the soldier he used to be in the way he sized up my condition. Wounded, exhausted, dangerous. Sit, he said, pouring me coffee without asking. Black, no sugar, the way we'd drunk it in Baghdad. Before you ask, yes, it's legal fraud. Yes, we can fight it. But Jim, he pushed another folder across his mahogany desk. You need to see who bought the house. I opened it. The name hit me like a sledgehammer. Anthony Tony Rossini. Linda's ex-husband? That piece of shit who went to prison for money laundering. Got out early. Good behavior, supposedly. Jim, this stinks of coercion. Nobody sells a house for 30% of market value unless they're being forced. I stood up so fast the coffee spilled. Where is she? Where's my sister? She's still living in the house. That's the weird part. The sale went through, but she's still there, like she's waiting for something or someone, waiting for me to come home and walk into whatever trap they'd set. I need to see her, now. Jim, you need to be smart about this. Tony Rossini isn't just some ex-con. Word is he's connected to the Torino family. Real deal mafia, not movie stuff. You can't just watch me. The drive from Philadelphia to Scranton took 2 hours. 2 hours of Pennsylvania rolling past my window. Familiar hills and valleys that should have felt like coming home. Instead, every mile felt like advancing into enemy territory. The house looked exactly the same from the outside. Dad's white fence recently painted. Mom's rose bushes trimmed neat. Even the American flag was flying, which made my blood boil. Tony Rossini had no right to fly our father's flag. I knocked not a regular knock, but the family code Dad taught us. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Morse code for SOS, but we'd always said it meant safe or sound, our way of asking if everything was okay. The door opened, and there was Linda. 54 years old now, blonde hair that came from a bottle trying to hide the gray, wearing too much makeup like she always did when she was stressed. Her face went white as paper when she saw me. Jim, you're supposed to be. Dead? Yeah, I saw the paperwork. Imagine my surprise, Linda, getting resurrected after you already buried me. You don't understand. She glanced over her shoulder, nervous as a deer hearing wolves. You shouldn't be here. He said you were. They showed me documents from the army. Who's they, Linda? Tony? Since when do you let that bastard back in your life? It's not like that. Then what's it like? Explain to me how my own sister sells our parents' house while I'm bleeding in Afghanistan. Explain how you signed my name on documents declaring me dead. Her hands were shaking now. She stepped aside to let me in, and that's when I saw it. The house had been stripped. Mom's paintings gone. Dad's medals from Korea gone. The grandfather clock that had been in our family since 1892, gone, replaced with cheap soulless furniture that looked like it came from some discount warehouse. What did you do? My voice came out as a whisper, which was somehow worse than yelling. I had no choice. She was crying now, mascara running in black rivers. I owe them $800,000, Jim. They were going to kill Emma. Emma, her daughter, my 16-year-old niece who used to call me Uncle Hero. Start from the beginning, I said, sinking onto the unfamiliar couch. Everything. She sat across from me, wringing her hands. Tony came back 2 years ago, said he'd changed, found God in prison. I was lonely, Jim. You were always deployed, and I let him back in. He got me into poker games, private games with his friends. I thought I was good at it. Turns out they were letting me win at first. Then the real game started, and I kept losing, kept borrowing to cover, and suddenly I owed more money than I could ever pay back. So you sold the house. They made me. They had Emma for a week, Jim, a whole week, sent me videos of her crying, begging me to do whatever they wanted. When they brought her back, Tony said if I didn't sign everything over, next time she wouldn't come back at all. I wanted to comfort her, but rage was building in my chest like pressure in a boiler. Where's Tony now? I don't know, he comes and goes. Jim, he has cameras everywhere. He's probably watching us, right? A door slammed upstairs. Heavy footsteps on the stairs. Linda went rigid with fear. Well, the dead soldier rises. Tony Rossini descended the stairs like he owned the place, which technically, legally, he did. 57 years old, still had that slick Italian-American look, hair greased back, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars. 3 men followed him, all carrying barely concealed weapons. Tony, I said, standing slowly, keeping my hands visible. We need to talk. No talking necessary, Sergeant. This is my house now. You're trespassing. But I'm a reasonable man. You leave now, forget all this unfortunate confusion, and everyone stays healthy. Even little Emma stays healthy. Isn't that right, Linda? Linda made a sound like a wounded animal. That's when she did something I didn't expect. She lunged for the kitchen, grabbed a knife from the block, but instead of pointing it at Tony, she pressed it against her own throat. I can't do this anymore, she screamed. I can't keep pretending everything's okay. Jim, he killed Dad. He told me when he was drunk. Made it look like an accident. The room froze. Even Tony's men looked uncertain. My father, killed. Not a car accident like we'd been told, but murdered by this piece of shit standing in our family home. Linda, I said very quietly, put the knife down. Why? So he can keep using me? Keep threatening Emma? I'd rather die. Because, I said, never taking my eyes off Tony, dead witnesses don't testify in court. And Linda, we're going to bury this son of a bitch. Legally. Permanently. I promise you that. Tony laughed, but it sounded forced. You got nothing, soldier boy. Nothing but the word of a hysterical woman who's been declared mentally incompetent. Oh yeah, did she tell you about that? Court order, signed last month. She can't testify to anything. That's when the doorbell rang. Everyone tensed. Tony nodded to one of his men, who peered through the peephole. Boss, the thug said nervously, it's that hot black chick from this morning. The one asking about property records at City Hall. Sarah Williams. Ghost. My backup had arrived, and Tony Rossini had no idea what was about to hit him. Don't answer it, Tony commanded, but his man was already reaching for the door handle. The door swung open, and there she was, Sarah Williams, all 5'10" of lethal grace, wearing a business suit that did nothing to hide the tactical vest underneath. Former NSA, current freelance security consultant, and the best cyber warfare specialist I'd ever served with. Hi there, she said sweetly to the thug, then looked past him to me. Jim, heard you were back from the dead. Mind if I come in? It's cold out here. Tony's eyes narrowed. Lady, this is a private. The red laser dot appeared on his forehead before he could finish. Through the window, barely visible in the tray line across the street, was the glint of a rifle scope. That would be my partner, Sarah said, stepping inside like she owned the place. Marine sniper, documented 37 confirmed kills in Iraq. His hands been real steady since he quit drinking. Well, mostly quit. Tony, honey, you might want to tell your boys to keep their hands where we can see them. The room turned into a Mexican standoff. Tony's 3 men had their hands hovering near their weapons. Sarah stood relaxed but ready, and somewhere outside, her partner had a rifle trained on Tony's head. You military people, Tony said, trying to sound casual, always sticking together, but this is a family matter. Linda owes me money. The house is legal collateral. Funny thing about that, Sarah said, pulling out her phone. I've been doing some digging. BHL Properties. That's your company, right? Been busy lately. 5 houses in the past year, all bought for way under market value, all from elderly owners or their families, all with questionable paperwork. Prove it, Tony snapped. Oh, I will. But first, let's talk about Henry Mitchell's death. 2010, right? Car went off Lackawanna Bridge. Tragic accident, everyone said. I watched Tony's face. Just for a second, a flicker of something. Surprise? Fear? Yeah, real tragic, he said. I even went to the funeral. Linda was devastated. Were you devastated, Tony? I asked, stepping between him and Linda, who still held the knife with shaking hands. Or were you celebrating? Getting rid of the one man who saw through your bullshit? Tony laughed, but it was forced. You're fishing, soldier boy. Your old man had a heart attack while driving. Medical examiner confirmed it. The medical examiner you paid off? Sarah asked innocently. Dr. Martin Hodges? Same one who signed off on 3 other suspicious deaths linked to the Torino family? That medical examiner? Now Tony's men were getting nervous, shifting their weight, looking at their boss for guidance. Here's what I think happened, I said, moving slowly closer to Tony. Dad wouldn't sell you his construction company. You needed it to launder money. So you forced him off that bridge, made it look like an accident. Then you waited, played the long game, got Linda hooked on gambling, buried her in debt, and used her to get the house. The company might be gone, but the property, that's worth millions for the right development. You can't prove shit, Tony said, but sweat was beading on his forehead despite the cool October air. Tony, Linda suddenly spoke up, her voice stronger now. You told me, 3 months ago. You were drunk on that expensive whiskey, bragging about how you handled Dad, how you made him sign over his life insurance before he died. You said you held his head underwater in his own car after you ran him off the bridge. made sure he couldn't swim out. The room went dead silent. "Shut up, you crazy bitch," Tony snarled. "You're mentally incompetent, remember? Court certified." "About that," Sarah said, tapping her phone. "Judge Morrison, who signed that order. He's under federal investigation. Seems he's been taking bribes to sign false competency evaluations. FBI picked him up this morning." Tony's face went from red to purple. "You got nothing. It's all hearsay." "Actually," Sarah continued, "we've got quite a bit. See, when you had Linda's house swept for bugs last month, your guys missed something. Military-grade microtransmitters. Been recording everything for weeks." That was a bluff, I could tell by the slight tilt of Sarah's head. But Tony didn't know that. "Including," she added, "your confession about Henry Mitchell, and your detailed explanation of your money laundering operation, and your connections to the Torino family's drug running from Mexico." One of Tony's men, the youngest one, started backing toward the door. "Boss, maybe we should—" "Nobody moves." Tony pulled out a pistol, waving it wildly between Sarah and me. "This is my house, my operation. I didn't work this hard to have some washed-up soldier and his bitch ruin everything." "Tony," I said calmly, the way I'd talk to panicked privates under fire, "put the gun down. You're already looking at fraud charges. Don't add attempted murder." "Murder?" He laughed maniacally. "Like your daddy? Like how I watched him beg? Please, I got kids," he said. "They need me." Well, guess what? They didn't need him. They needed to learn that Tony Rossini always wins. There it was, confession. And Sarah's phone had been recording the whole time. That part wasn't a bluff. "Did you get that?" I asked her. "Crystal clear," she replied, "uploading to 3 secure servers as we speak." Tony's gun swung toward Sarah, and everything happened at once. The window shattered as the sniper's bullet caught Tony's gun hand. Linda dropped the knife and dove behind the couch. Tony's men hit the floor, and I lunged forward. 20 years of combat training compressed into 3 seconds of violence. I hit Tony's center mass, driving him back into the wall. His gun went flying. We went down hard, rolling across Mom's hardwood floors, or what used to be Mom's floors. He was stronger than he looked, fighting dirty with elbows and knees, but I'd been fighting for my life in places a lot worse than a Scranton living room. I got him in a chokehold, not enough to kill, just enough to make him stop struggling. "That's for my father, you son of a bitch," I whispered in his ear as he went limp. Sirens were already wailing in the distance. Sarah must have called them before she even knocked. "Jim," she said, "we've got about 60 seconds before this place is crawling with cops. Anything you want to say to him while he's still conscious?" I looked down at Tony, gasping for air on the floor. Then I looked at Linda, emerging from behind the couch, tears streaming down her face. "Yeah," I said. "Tony, you're going to prison. But not just any prison. Military prison. See, you made one mistake. You confessed to murdering a veteran, a Korean War veteran. That makes it a federal crime. And where you're going. They really don't like people who hurt veterans." The cops had taken Tony away 2 hours ago, but I couldn't leave the house. Not yet. Linda was upstairs with Emma, who'd come home from school to find police tape and chaos. Sarah was in the kitchen, coordinating with her contacts at the FBI. And me, I was in the basement, flashlight in hand, searching for something I prayed was still there. "Find anything?" Marcus Chen's voice came from the stairs. He'd arrived an hour ago with a forensic team and a court order to search the premises. "Not yet," I said, running my hands along the foundation wall. But Dad was paranoid after Vietnam. Always had backup plans. "Jim, we've got Tony's confession. That should be enough." "Should be isn't good enough. We need everything." That's when my fingers found it. A loose brick, painted over, but definitely loose. I pulled it out, and behind it was an old ammunition box, the kind we used in Korea. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a USB drive and a note in Dad's handwriting. "If you're reading this, something happened to me. The truth is on this drive. Trust no one except family. Real family. PHM." We went upstairs where Sarah had set up her laptop. The USB was encrypted, military grade, but Sarah cracked it in under 5 minutes. "Your dad knew his stuff," she said, impressed. The first file was a video, dated 3 weeks before Dad died. He was sitting in this very room, looking directly at the camera. "My name is Henry Mitchell, Master Sergeant, retired, United States Army. I'm making this recording because I believe my life is in danger. Anthony Rossini has been pressuring me to sell my construction company. I've refused. He's made threats against my family, specifically my daughter Linda. I'm documenting everything in case something happens to me." The video went on for 20 minutes. Dad detailed Tony's offers, his threats, even recorded phone conversations. But the last part made my blood run cold. "If you're watching this, Jim, it means he got to me. Don't let anger consume you, son. Protect Linda. She's vulnerable to men like Tony. And remember, the real treasure isn't the house or the money. It's in the third panel of the basement wall behind your mother's canning shelves. Everything you need is there." "Third panel?" Marcus asked. I was already heading back to the basement, the others following. Mom's old canning shelves were still there, covered in dust and spider webs. We moved them aside, and I found the panel, a piece of drywall that looked like all the others, except this one was hollow when I knocked. I punched through it. Inside was a fireproof safe, and inside that, holy shit, Sarah whispered. Cash. Stacks of it. At least $200,000. And beneath the money, documents. Deeds to properties I didn't know Dad owned. Patents for construction techniques worth millions. And a second will notarized and witnessed, dated 1 week before his death. This changes everything, Marcus said, scanning the will. It specifically states that if either of his children is coerced or threatened into selling family assets, all inheritance goes to the other sibling. And look at this clause. If foul play is suspected in his death, a trust fund of $2 million in life insurance gets activated. $2 million, Linda's voice came from the stairs. She looked awful, pale, shaky, like she'd aged 10 years in the last hour. Dad had that kind of money? He was smarter than any of us knew, I said, holding up a patent document. This alone is worth $5 million. It's for an earthquake-resistant foundation system. Companies have been licensing it for years, payments going to a trust. But why didn't he tell us? Linda asked. Sarah pulled up another file on the USB. Because of this. Tony wasn't just threatening you, Linda. He had connections inside the military, people feeding him information about Jim's deployments. Every time Jim was overseas, Tony made a move. Your dad was trying to protect both of you. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code, Washington, D.C. Sergeant Mitchell? The voice was crisp, military. This is Colonel Roberts, Pentagon Intelligence. We've been monitoring the Rossini situation. Are you secure? Sir? I was confused. How do you? Your father saved my life in Vietnam, son. I've been watching out for your family ever since. We knew about Tony's connections to the Taliban weapons trade, but we needed proof. The FBI raid on his properties today gave us that proof. Taliban? My mind was racing. Tony was selling weapons to the Taliban, the same weapons that have been killing American soldiers, maybe even the rockets that hit your position last week. Sergeant Mitchell, we need you to come to D.C. tomorrow. Bring everything you've found. After he hung up, the room was silent. Then Linda started crying, not the desperate sobs from earlier, but something deeper, more painful. I helped him, she whispered. I helped the man who killed Dad, who tried to kill you. Oh God, Jim, what have I done? You survived, I said, pulling her into a hug. That's what you did. You survived. But even as I held my sister, my mind was working through the implications. Tony wasn't just a local criminal. He was part of something bigger, something that reached from Scranton to Afghanistan. And somehow our family was at the center of it all. Sarah's laptop pinged. Guys, you need to see this. I've been tracking Tony's financial records. 3 days ago, he transferred $50 million to an account in the Caymans. The account name, he was planning to frame you for everything. Make it look like you were the mastermind. Tony gets away clean, you take the fall. Another ping. Sarah's face went pale. Jim, the transfer was just reversed. The money's moving again, and Tony's not in federal custody anymore. What? I grabbed the laptop. The news feed showed a burning federal transport van on I-81. 3 marshals dead. Prisoner missing. He had help, Sarah said. Professional help. This isn't over. My phone rang again. This time it was Tony's number. Hello, Sergeant. His voice was calm, too calm. Nice little family reunion you had. But you forgot something. I've got Emma. You've got 1 hour to bring me everything you found, or your niece learns what happened to Grandpa. And trust me, I'll make it last longer this time. 1 hour. Tony had given me 1 hour, and 37 minutes had already burned away while we sat in this basement, staring at Dad's hidden fortune like it could somehow bring Emma home safe. I stood up from the concrete floor, brushing dust off my knees, and caught my reflection in the old mirror Dad had mounted above his workbench. 58 years old. Gray stubble. I hadn't bothered to shave, eyes that had seen too much death, shoulders still aching from Afghanistan shrapnel. What are you thinking? Sarah asked, watching me study myself. I'm thinking I've been playing this all wrong, I said, turning away from the mirror, acting like some victim whose house got stolen, like some bereaved son crying over his dead father. Jim, Linda started. No, my voice cut through the basement like a blade. I am not a victim. I am a United States Army Master Sergeant with 35 years of combat experience. I've survived 5 deployments, killed enemy combatants in 7 countries, and led men through hell and back. Tony Rossini thinks he's dealing with some broken-down old civilian. I picked up one of Dad's hammers from the workbench, tested its weight. He's about to learn the difference between a soldier and a civilian. The difference is simple. Civilians call the police when someone threatens their family. Soldiers eliminate the threat. Whoa, hold up, Marcus said, standing quickly. Jim, I know you're angry, but we can't what? Can't save my niece because we might break some rules? Marcus, you're a lawyer. You think Tony's going to honor some legal process? You think he's going to let Emma live just because we ask nicely? Sarah was watching me with those sharp eyes of hers, the ones that had spotted insurgent movement from 2 miles away in Kandahar. What are you proposing, Jim? I'm proposing we stop reacting to Tony's moves and start making our own. I moved to Dad's old filing cabinet, pulled out a map of Lackawanna County. Tony's got Emma somewhere local. Has to be, he called 40 minutes ago, traffic noise in the background. City traffic, not highway. I spread the map on the workbench. Sarah, you said he transferred money 3 days ago. That means he's been planning this extraction since before we even arrested him. He's got a safe house prepared. Okay, she said, pulling out her laptop. I can track his known associates, cross-reference with property records. No time for all that. I grabbed a red marker, started circling locations on the map. Think like a soldier, not a detective. Tony needs 3 things: isolation for soundproofing, multiple escape routes, and somewhere his people can watch for approaching threats. That eliminates downtown, eliminates residential neighborhoods. Linda was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Maybe she hadn't, not this version of me. Not the warrior. The old steel plant, she said suddenly. Tony used to take me there when we were married. Said it was where he went to think. It's abandoned, but the buildings are still solid. Perfect. I marked it on the map. Industrial area, multiple exits, clear sightlines in all directions. I looked up at the others. Here's what we're going to do. Jim, Marcus tried again. Whatever you're planning, think about the legal ramifications. If you assault, Marcus. My voice went quiet, the way it did when I was giving orders in a combat zone. Emma is 16 years old. Her grandfather is dead because of Tony Rossini. Her mother nearly died because of Tony Rossini. I've been shot at, lied to, and manipulated by Tony Rossini. You think I give a damn about legal ramifications? The basement went silent except for the hum of Sarah's laptop. But I continued. I'm not going in there guns blazing like some action movie hero. I'm going to do this smart. Military smart. I turned to Sarah. Ghost, I need you to create a diversion. Something big enough to draw Tony's attention, but not so big it puts Emma at risk. I can work with that, she said. What kind of diversion? The kind that makes him think the FBI found him. Helicopter flyovers, radio chatter on frequencies his scanner picks up, maybe some fake news alerts about a federal task force closing in. And while he's focused on the fake threat, I go in the back door. I looked at Linda. You said Emma's been taking gymnastics. Is she good at following instructions under pressure? She's tough, Jim. Tougher than I ever was. Good, because she's going to have to help with her own rescue. My phone buzzed. Text message from Tony's number, but it was a video file. I opened it and my heart nearly stopped. Emma was tied to a chair in what looked like an old industrial building. Concrete walls, rusty pipes, exactly what I'd expect from the steel plant. But she wasn't crying, wasn't begging. She was looking directly at the camera with eyes that reminded me of Dad's stubborn, unafraid. Tell Uncle Jim I'm okay, she said clearly, and tell him the bad man is stupid. He left my phone in my backpack, and I already sent my location to all my friends before he took it away. The camera jerked, Tony's voice cursing in the background. I looked at the others. That's my girl. Smart, just like her grandfather. Jim, Sarah said, staring at her laptop screen. Emma's GPS signal is live. I've got her exact location. Where? Building C at the old Bethlehem Steel Complex. But Jim, I'm reading at least 6 heat signatures in that building. Tony's got backup. 6 men. I nodded, already calculating angles of attack, fields of fire, extraction routes, acceptable odds. Acceptable. Marcus looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Jim, you're talking about taking on 6 armed men by yourself. No, I said, checking my watch. I'm talking about taking on 6 street thugs who've never faced a trained soldier. There's a difference. I started moving toward the stairs. Linda, call Emma's friends. Get them to forward that GPS data to the FBI. Give them something real to respond to. Sarah, start your diversion in 20 minutes. Marcus, be ready to provide legal cover for whatever happens next. Where are you going? Linda called after me. I paused at the foot of the stairs, looked back at the room where Dad had hidden his secrets, where I'd finally stopped thinking like a victim and started thinking like a warrior. I'm going to get our girl back, I said, and then I'm going to end this thing with Tony Rossini once and for all. As I climbed the stairs, I could hear Dad's voice in my head, clear as if he were standing right beside me. Son, the Mitchell family fortress doesn't fall to enemy fire. It falls to betrayal from within. But you know what beats betrayal? Loyalty. And you know what beats fear? Action. Time to take action. The Bethlehem Steel Complex looked like a graveyard of American industry. Rusted smokestacks reached toward gray October clouds, and weeds pushed through cracked concrete that once bustled with workers. I crouched behind an overturned rail car, watching buildings see through binoculars I'd borrowed from Sarah's gear bag. 6 heat signatures, she'd said. I could see 3 on the ground floor through broken windows, 2 by the main entrance, 1 roaming patrol. The others had to be upstairs with Emma. My radio crackled. Sarah's voice, barely a whisper. Ghost 1 to actual. Diversion is live. Fake FBI chatter going out on all frequencies. Helicopter sounds on loop from speakers I planted 2 blocks north. Copy Ghost 1. How long until they bite? Already biting. I can see movement through my scope. 2 tangos moving toward the north windows, trying to spot the helicopter that isn't there. Perfect. Classic misdirection. Make the enemy look where you want them to look, while you hit them where they're not looking. I keyed the radio again. Marcus, you in position? About a quarter-mile out with Linda and the FBI team Agent Rodriguez brought. Jim, they're getting impatient. Want to move now? Negative. Tell them to wait for my signal. If they come in too early, Emma gets hurt. I checked my watch. 17 minutes since I'd left the house. 17 minutes since I'd stopped being a victim and started being a soldier again. The transformation felt like putting on an old uniform. Everything fit exactly right. Moving low and fast, I reached the building's rear loading dock. The metal door was chained shut, but the chain was rusty. One good kick and it snapped. Military boots were good for something after all. Inside the building was a maze of abandoned machinery and concrete pillars. Perfect cover, but also perfect places for an ambush. I moved the way they'd taught us in urban warfare training. Quick rushes from cover to cover, always listening, always watching. That's when I heard Emma's voice echoing from somewhere above. You know, for a criminal mastermind, you're really not that smart. Tony's response was muffled but angry. Good girl, keep him talking. Keep his attention focused on you instead of watching for rescue. I found the stairwell, started climbing. Each step was calculated, placing my feet where the metal wouldn't groan. Halfway up, I heard something that made my blood freeze. A different voice. Young, scared. Mom? Mom, are you okay? There was another girl up there. Not just Emma, someone else. Someone Tony was using as leverage. My radio buzzed. Text message from Sarah. Heat sig analysis shows 2 hostages, not 1. Second girl, smaller, northeast corner of building. Damn it. Tony had been planning this longer than we thought. How many pieces did he have on the board that we didn't know about? I reached the second floor, pressed myself against the wall, and peered around the corner. There was Emma, tied to a chair in the middle of a large room filled with old industrial equipment. But in the corner, almost hidden behind a concrete pillar, was another chair. Another girl, maybe 12 years old, brown hair, crying quietly. And standing between them, pacing like a caged animal, was Tony Rossini. He looked different than he had at the house. Desperate, unhinged. The kind of desperate that made people do stupid, violent things. You think your uncle's some kind of hero? Tony was saying to Emma. Let me tell you about your precious Uncle Jim. He killed 17 people in Iraq. 17. Shot them down like dogs. Yeah, Emma said calmly. And every one of them was shooting at American soldiers. That's called defending your country, you psycho. That's when Tony backhanded her. The sound echoed through the building like a gunshot. I was halfway across the room before I realized I'd moved. Training said to assess, plan, execute. But family trumped training. Nobody put hands on my niece. Get away from her. My voice cut through the room like a blade. Tony spun around, gun in his hand, but he was too slow. 35 years of combat experience versus a street thug who'd spent too many years getting soft in prison. I had the Sig Sauer pressed against his throat before he could even raise his weapon. Drop it, Tony. Game over. You think so? He was sweating, but there was still that arrogant smile. Look behind you, soldier boy. I didn't look. Rule 1 of close quarters combat, never take your eyes off the primary threat. But I heard them. Footsteps on metal stairs. Multiple sets. His backup had arrived. 3 men on the stairs, Tony said, reading my face. All armed, all with nothing to lose. You shoot me, they shoot the girls. You let me go. Maybe everyone lives. Maybe isn't good enough. I pressed the gun harder against his throat. Here's what's going to happen, Tony. You're going to tell your boys to stand down. Then you're going to untie both girls. Then you're going to walk out of here with me, nice and peaceful. Or what? Or I put a bullet in your brain and take my chances with your boys. The footsteps had stopped. Tony's men were positioned, waiting for orders. The room felt like a powder keg with too many lit fuses. That's when Emma did something that reminded me why the Mitchell family had survived 3 generations of wars. Uncle Jim, she said, her voice steady despite the blood on her lip from Tony's slap. The other girl isn't a hostage. She's Sophie, Tony's daughter. He brought his own kid to use as a human shield. The room went dead silent. Even Tony's tough guys on the stairs seemed stunned. I looked at the girl in the corner. Really looked at her. She had Tony's dark eyes, his olive complexion, and she was staring at her father like she'd never seen him before. Daddy! Sophie's voice was small, broken. You said we were just going to talk to the nice lady. You said nobody would get hurt. Tony's face crumbled. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely ashamed. Sophie, baby, you don't understand. I understand plenty. The 12-year-old girl's voice was stronger now, filled with disgust. You lied to me, you always lie. And now you're going to hurt people, aren't you? That's when everything went to hell. One of Tony's men on the stairs, apparently deciding his boss was compromised, opened fire. Bullets sparked off concrete and metal. I dove left, pulling Tony with me as a human shield. Emma rolled her chair backward, tipping it over behind a steel beam. Sophie screamed and curled into a ball. And somewhere in the chaos, my radio crackled with Sarah's voice. Jim! Buildings surrounded by real FBI now. Rodriguez got impatient. They're coming in hard, all entrances. Through the gunfire and shouting, I heard the sound that every veteran knows by heart. Multiple helicopters approaching fast, military style. The trap wasn't just springing on me, it was springing on all of us. The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it started. In the ringing silence that followed, I could hear helicopters getting closer. Real ones this time, not Sarah's audio loop. The FBI wasn't waiting for my signal anymore. Daddy, I'm scared. Sophie's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Tony was still pressed against me, my gun at his throat, but something had changed in his face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something I hadn't expected to see, genuine fear for his daughter. Let her go, he said quietly. Jim, I'll do whatever you want. Just let Sophie walk out of here safe. Nobody's walking anywhere until those boys upstairs drop their weapons, I replied. But I was calculating. 3 armed men on the stairwell, 2 hostages, real federal agents surrounding the building, and helicopters that would be dropping tactical teams any second. My radio crackled. Jim, this is Agent Rodriguez. We have the building surrounded. You have 60 seconds to come out with your hands visible, or we're coming in with everything we've got. 60 seconds. Not enough time to negotiate. Not enough time to explain the situation. Barely enough time to think. Emma, I called out. You still with me, kiddo? Still here, Uncle Jim. Chair's busted, but I'm free. Her voice came from behind the steel beam where she'd taken cover. Sophie's hurt, though. Think she hit her head when she dove for cover. I looked at Tony. His face had gone pale. She's just a kid, Jim. 12 years old. She doesn't even know what I do for a living. I told her I was a real estate developer. Well, technically you weren't lying, I said grimly. You do develop real estate. Right after you steal it. That's when Sarah's voice came through my earpiece, urgent and low. Jim, I've got bad news and worse news. Bad news is Rodriguez has snipers positioning on 3 sides of the building. Worse news is I'm reading heat signatures of more tangos approaching from the east. This wasn't just Tony's operation. More men coming. The Torino family, probably. Or whoever Tony was really working for. This was about to become a 3-way firefight with 2 kids caught in the middle. How many? I asked. At least 8, maybe 10. SUVs, professional-grade weapons. ETA 3 minutes. I made a decision that went against 35 years of military training. Sometimes you had to trust the enemy. Tony, I said, easing the pressure on his throat slightly, your boss is about to hang you out to dry. Those aren't your guys coming. They're here to clean up loose ends, including you and your daughter. His eyes went wide. What are you talking about? You think the Torino family is going to let you live after botching this operation? After getting arrested? After bringing federal heat down on everyone? They're coming to tie up loose ends, and you're a very loose end. The sound of engines grew louder outside. Heavy vehicles moving fast. Jim, Emma's voice was urgent now. I can see Sophie. She's not responding. We need to get her to a hospital. Tony's composure finally cracked. Sophie, baby, can you hear Daddy? Silence from the corner where she'd been hiding. I holstered my weapon and stepped away from Tony. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call off your boys upstairs. I'm going to get both girls out of here safe. And then you're going to surrender to Agent Rodriguez before your former friends turn this place into a shooting gallery. Why would you help me? Tony asked, suspicion and desperation warring in his voice. I'm not helping you. I'm protecting those girls. There's a difference. Tony pulled out his phone, hit speed dial. Frankie, it's me. Stand down. All of you, stand down and get out of the building. Now. Boss, what about the now, Frankie? There are kids in here. I heard boots on metal stairs. Tony's men retreating fast. Good. 3 fewer guns in an already complicated situation. I moved to where Sophie had taken cover. She was conscious but dazed, a small cut on her forehead bleeding slowly. Hey there, sweetheart. I'm Jim, Emma's uncle. We're going to get you out of here, okay? She nodded weakly. Are you going to arrest my daddy? Before I could answer, the building shook. Explosion outside, close enough to rattle the windows. Sarah's voice crackled through my earpiece. Contact, contact. Torino soldiers engaging FBI perimeter. This is going hot, Jim. Automatic weapons fire erupted outside, echoing off the concrete walls. The federal agents and the mafia cleanup crew had found each other. We need to move now. I scooped Sophie into my arms while Tony helped Emma to her feet. There's a service elevator shaft on the north side. We can rappel down, get clear of the firefight. Jim, Tony said as we started moving, I need you to know something. Your father, he didn't suffer. I made it quick. I'm not proud of what I did, but I need you to know he didn't suffer. I stopped walking. After everything, after all the lies and manipulation and violence, Tony Rossini was trying to give me comfort about my father's murder. Why? I asked. Why kill him at all? Because he figured out we were laundering money through construction contracts. He was going to the FBI. I couldn't let that happen, but I respected him. We both served our country, so I made it quick. Emma looked between us, confused. Uncle Jim, what's he talking about? Before I could answer, more explosions rocked the building. Closer this time. Sarah's voice in my ear. Building C is taking fire. RPGs. You need to get out now. I looked at Tony holding his injured daughter, at Emma standing brave despite everything she'd been through, at the chaos outside where federal agents were dying because of this man's crimes. We finish this later, I said. Right now, we get these kids to safety. The service elevator shaft was exactly where I remembered it from the building schematics I'd studied during my approach. Military habit. Always know your exit routes. I attached my rappelling gear to the cables, tested the weight. Emma first, I said. Then Sophie. Tony, you go last. What about you? I handed him the rappel device. I'll find another way down. Someone needs to stay behind and slow down anyone who tries to follow. Emma grabbed my arm. Uncle Jim, no. We're not leaving you. You're not leaving me, kiddo. You're following orders. Get to the FBI perimeter. Tell Agent Rodriguez that friendly forces are still in the building. Can you do that? She nodded, tears in her eyes but steel in her voice. Yes, sir. As they disappeared down the shaft, gunfire continued to rage outside. I moved to the window, looked down at the chaos below. FBI vehicles behind concrete barriers, muzzle flashes from 3 different directions, smoke rising from burning cars. My radio crackled one last time. Sarah, Jim, satellite imagery shows more vehicles approaching. This isn't going to end well. Whatever you're planning, do it fast. I checked my weapon, made sure I had extra magazines, looked around the abandoned industrial building where my family's nightmare had led us. Time to end this thing once and for all. The first rocket-propelled grenade hit the building's east wall 30 seconds after Emma and the others reached ground level. The explosion shook concrete dust from the ceiling, and I knew I had maybe 2 minutes before this place became my tomb. My radio crackled with Sarah's voice. Jim, Torino's people have heavy weapons. They're not trying to capture anyone. They're trying to erase everyone. You need to move now. I was already moving, making my way toward the stairwell where Tony's men had retreated. The building's layout was burned into my memory from years of urban warfare training. Always know where the structural supports are. Always know which walls will stop bullets and which ones won't. That's when I heard footsteps above me. Heavy boots trying to be quiet but failing. Someone was still in the building. I pressed against a concrete pillar and listened. 2 sets of footsteps, moving with purpose toward the elevator shaft where we'd just escaped. They weren't Tony's men. His guys had fled when he ordered them to. These were professionals. A voice drifted down from the floor above, speaking in accented English. Rossini got away. Boss wants the building cleaned. No witnesses, no evidence. What about the federal agents outside? What about them? They're busy with our decoy team. By the time they realize what happened, this place will be nothing but rubble. Decoy team. These weren't just cleanup crews. This was a full military operation. The Torino family had resources I hadn't anticipated. Another RPG hit the building, this one closer. The whole structure groaned, and I could smell smoke starting to filter through the ventilation system. They were going to bring the entire building down with me in it. I keyed my radio. Ghost 1, I need an exit strategy. Building's compromised. Multiple tangos still inside, and they're planning to level the place. Working on it, Sarah replied. Can you get to the roof? Negative. Stairwell's blocked, and I've got hostiles between me and the service ladder. Okay, new plan. Remember the drainage tunnel system Dad used to talk about? The one that connects all the old steel buildings? I did remember. Dad had worked construction on these buildings back in the 70s. He'd mentioned the storm drain network that ran underneath the complex, wide enough for maintenance crews to walk through. Where's the access? Sub-basement level, northwest corner. But Jim, you've got maybe 90 seconds before they start dropping the serious ordnance. 90 seconds to get 2 floors down and find a tunnel entrance I'd never seen, while avoiding professional killers who wanted to erase me from existence. I'd faced worse odds in Fallujah. Moving fast but quiet, I reached the stairwell. The 2 men above were still talking, their voices echoing in the concrete space. Check the elevator shaft, make sure they didn't leave anything behind. What kind of anything? Anything that proves Tony Rossini was ever here. Boss wants this to look like a federal raid gone wrong. Dead FBI agents, collapsed building, no connection to the family. I started down the stairs, taking them 2 at a time but keeping my weight on the edges where they were less likely to creak. The sub-basement was darker than I'd expected. Emergency lighting long since failed. My phone's flashlight revealed a maze of machinery and pipes. Somewhere in this mechanical jungle was a storm drain access that might save my life. That's when I heard them coming down the stairs behind me. Movement in the sub-basement. Lighted up. Automatic weapons fire erupted behind me. I dove behind a massive boiler as bullets sparked off metal and concrete. These weren't the street thugs Tony usually worked with. Their fire discipline was too good. Their tactics too coordinated. I returned fire, 3 controlled bursts that sent them diving for cover. In the muzzle flashes, I caught a glimpse of their gear. Military-grade body armor, night vision goggles, weapons I recognized from my deployment days. "Who the hell are you people?" I called out. "Dead men walking," came the reply in heavily accented English. "Just like you." Another explosion rocked the building, this one strong enough to buckle some of the overhead pipes. Steam began hissing out, creating a fog that would work in my favor. I moved through the mechanical maze, using the steam cover and my knowledge of industrial layouts. Boilers needed drainage, which meant pipes that led to storm systems. I followed the largest pipe toward what I hoped was the building's northwest corner. Behind me, the 2 gunmen were advancing methodically, professional but cautious. They knew they had me trapped, so they were taking their time. That's when my flashlight beam caught it. A heavy metal grate set into the floor, with the familiar diamond pattern of storm drain access. The grate was rusted, but recent scratches around the bolts suggested someone had been down there recently. Another explosion above, strong enough to bring down chunks of ceiling. Whatever they were hitting the building with, it was working. I had minutes, maybe less. I wrenched the grate open, dropped into the tunnel below. The space was bigger than I'd expected. 6 feet high, 4 feet wide, with concrete walls slick with decades of moisture. Emergency lighting still worked down here, casting everything in an eerie red glow. I could hear voices above, the gunman reaching the spot where I'd disappeared. He went into the tunnels. Let him. Building comes down in 30 seconds. He'll be buried down there. 30 seconds. I started running, following the tunnel as it curved away from Building C. The red emergency lights strobed past like a countdown timer, and I could feel the building above me beginning to shake apart. 20 seconds. 15. 10. I threw myself flat as the world came apart above me. The explosion was massive, professional-grade demolition charges designed to bring down the entire structure. Concrete rained down through gaps in the tunnel ceiling, and the shockwave nearly burst my eardrums. But I was alive, buried under a mountain of rubble, trapped in a storm drain that might flood with the next heavy rain, but alive. My radio was dead, crushed in the collapse. My phone showed no signal, but I could hear something else. Voices, far ahead in the tunnel system. "Jim, Jim, if you can hear this, follow the lights, we're at the outlet." Sarah's voice echoing through the concrete arteries of the abandoned steel complex. I started crawling toward the sound, toward hope, toward the family that had never stopped looking for me. Behind me, Building C was nothing but rubble and smoke, but ahead of me, somewhere in the darkness, was the light that would lead me home. The tunnel ended at a concrete culvert that opened onto Lackawanna Creek, 300 yards from where Building C used to stand. Sarah was waiting with a military-grade emergency kit and a thermos of coffee that smelled like salvation. "You look like hell," she said, wrapping a thermal blanket around my shoulders. "Feel worse," I replied, accepting the coffee with hands that were still shaking from the adrenaline crash. "Where are Emma and Sophie?" "Hospital. Emma's fine, just cuts and bruises. Sophie has a mild concussion, but she'll be okay." Sarah's expression darkened. "Tony's in federal custody. Real custody this time. 3 agencies want to talk to him about everything from weapons trafficking to tax evasion." I looked back at the smoke rising from the collapsed building. "What about the Torino cleanup crew? 4 dead, 2 captured, rest scattered to the wind. FBI's calling it a major victory against organized crime." She paused. "They want to talk to you too, Jim. Lot of questions about what happened in there." "Let them ask. I've got nothing to hide anymore." The debriefing took 6 hours. 3 federal agencies, 2 state investigators, and 1 very patient military liaison who kept reminding everyone that I was a decorated veteran, not a suspect. Agent Rodriguez apologized for moving too fast, but I understood the pressure he was under. When multiple people are shooting at federal agents, protocols tend to accelerate. The story that emerged over the next few days was bigger than any of us had imagined. Tony Rossini wasn't just a local criminal who'd stolen my family's house. He was a mid-level operator in an international money laundering network that stretched from Mexican cartels to Taliban weapons dealers. The construction company he'd tried to steal from Dad was just one piece of a pipeline designed to clean dirty money through legitimate American businesses. Marcus met me outside the federal courthouse in Philadelphia 3 weeks later, carrying a folder thick enough to choke a horse. Good news and better news, he said, settling into the passenger seat of my rental car. Good news is Tony pled guilty to everything: murder, fraud, weapons trafficking, tax evasion. The whole catalog. He'll die in federal prison. And the better news? Your father's estate just got a lot bigger. He opened the folder, showed me documents I couldn't quite believe. Turns out Henry Mitchell was smarter than anyone gave him credit for. He suspected Tony was coming after the construction company, so he moved everything into a complex web of trusts and offshore accounts. Tony thought he was stealing a small-time operation. Actually, he was trying to steal a company worth $43 million. I stared at the numbers. 43 million? Your dad held patents on earthquake-resistant foundation systems that are standard in California construction. Every major building built west of the Rockies in the last 20 years paid licensing fees to Mitchell Construction. Marcus grinned. Tony killed the golden goose and didn't even know it existed. The reading of Dad's real will took place in the same courthouse where Tony had been sentenced. Linda was there, looking healthier than I'd seen her in years. Emma sat beside her, arm in a sling but smiling. Even Sophie was there with her court-appointed guardian, a kind woman from Child Services who specialized in kids whose parents were incarcerated. Before we begin, the probate judge said, I want to note something unusual about this case. Mr. Mitchell's will contains specific provisions that only activate under certain circumstances. Those circumstances have now been met. The will was complicated, but the core message was simple. Dad had known Tony would come after the family eventually. He'd prepared for it, if his children could stand together against a common threat. Specifically, if they could survive Tony's attempts to destroy the family, then they would inherit not just the house and the company, but a trust fund worth enough money to take care of the Mitchell family for generations. The estate's total value, the judge continued, including life insurance policies, patent revenues, and investment accounts, is approximately $67 million to be split equally between James and Linda Mitchell. Linda started crying. Not the desperate sobs I'd heard in the house, but tears of relief and hope. Jim, she whispered, I can pay for Sophie's therapy. I can send Emma to college. I can fix everything I broke. We'll fix it together, I said, squeezing her hand. That's what family does. But the biggest surprise came when we met at the house, our house, the following weekend. The FBI had cleared it as a crime scene, and Linda had spent the week cleaning and repairing the damage from Tony's occupation. Sophie was there, having convinced her guardian that she needed to see where her father had caused so much pain. At 12 years old, she was handling the truth about Tony better than most adults would. I brought something, she said shyly, pulling a small wooden box from her backpack. I found it in Dad's things before the police took everything. I think it belongs to your family. Inside the box were Dad's medals from Korea, the ones I thought had been lost forever. Tony had kept them as trophies, but Sophie had recognized that they belonged with people who would treasure them properly. Thank you, I said, pinning the bronze star back onto the living room wall where it belonged. Your father did terrible things, Sophie, but you're not your father. You get to choose who you become. She nodded solemnly. I want to be better than him. I want to help people instead of hurt them. Emma, who'd been quiet through most of the afternoon, suddenly spoke up. Uncle Jim, I've been thinking about college, about what I want to do with my life. What's that, kiddo? I want to study law, like Marcus. I want to help families who are dealing with what we dealt with. She looked around the room, at the space where so much pain and healing had happened. I want to make sure other kids don't have to go through what we went through. Your grandfather would be proud, I said. He always said the Mitchell family fights for what's right. As the sun set over Scranton that evening, I stood on the front porch where Dad used to sit and smoke his pipe. The house felt peaceful for the first time in months. Linda was inside, cooking dinner. Actually cooking, not heating up frozen meals. Emma was helping Sophie with her homework. Marcus was on the phone with someone about setting up college funds. My phone buzzed. Text from Sarah, who'd taken a new assignment in Washington. Saw the news about Tony's sentencing. Justice served. How you holding up? I typed back. Better than I have in years. Family's healing. House feels like home again. What's next for Master Sergeant Mitchell? I looked out at the yard where Dad had taught me to throw a football, where Mom had grown her prize-winning tomatoes, where 3 generations of Mitchell children had played and learned and grown into the people they were meant to be. Building something better, I replied. Something that lasts. 6 months later, I was standing in the same kitchen where Tony had threatened my family, but everything had changed. The smell of fresh paint mixed with Linda's homemade apple pie, and sunlight streamed through windows that had been replaced after the FBI investigation. The house felt alive again. Uncle Jim, can you help me with this? Emma called from the dining room, where she was setting up a presentation board for her senior project. At 17 now, she'd grown into the kind of young woman who could face down armed criminals and still worry about getting good grades. What's the topic again? I asked, adjusting the easel so her poster board wouldn't tip over. Legal advocacy for victims of financial elder abuse. I'm using our case as the primary example. She grinned. Mrs. Patterson says it's the most compelling senior project she's seen in 20 years of teaching. The doorbell rang, and Linda went to answer it. Her movements were confident now, no longer the nervous glances over her shoulder that had defined her for so many months. Therapy was helping, but I think what helped most was having a purpose again. That'll be Sophie and her foster mom, Linda called. They're early for Sunday dinner. Sophie Martinez. She'd legally changed her last name 6 months ago, wanting no connection to the Rossini name, bounded into the kitchen like she belonged here. At 13 now, she was thriving with the Hernandez family, who'd adopted her after Tony's conviction. But Sundays were reserved for what she called Mitchell family time. Mr. Jim, she said, hugging me with the enthusiasm only teenagers could muster. I got accepted into the summer program at Penn State, the one for kids who want to study social work. That's fantastic, kiddo. Your dad would be. I stopped myself, the old habit of trying to find something positive to say about Tony. My dad would probably try to figure out how to make money off it, Sophie said matter-of-factly. But my new family is proud of me, and that's what matters. Carmen Hernandez, Sophie's foster mother, shook my hand warmly. She's been talking about this dinner all week. You've become very important to her, Mr. Mitchell. She's important to us too, I said, and meant it. Somewhere along the way, Sophie had stopped being Tony's daughter and started being just Sophie. Smart, funny, determined to make the world a little better than she'd found it. Marcus arrived as Linda was pulling the roast out of the oven, carrying a bottle of wine and a legal folder that never seemed to leave his side these days. More paperwork? I asked. The good kind. The Mitchell Foundation is officially approved as a nonprofit. We can start operations next month. He opened the folder, showed me documents with official seals and signatures. Your father's money is going to help a lot of families, Jim. The Mitchell Foundation had been Emma's idea, actually. Use part of Dad's inheritance to provide legal aid and financial counseling to families facing the kind of predatory schemes Tony had run. Marcus was donating his time as legal counsel, and we'd hired 3 full-time advocates who specialized in elder abuse cases. How many cases are we taking on? Linda asked, setting plates around the dinner table. 47 to start with, Marcus replied. Families from Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia, all dealing with variations of what happened to you folks. As we sat down to eat, I looked around the table at faces that had become family in ways I'd never expected. Emma, preparing for college at Georgetown where she'd study pre-law. Linda, healthier and happier than I'd seen her since we were kids. Sophie, building a life with people who loved her for who she was, not who her father had been. Marcus, taking cases now because they mattered, not because they paid well. And then there was the empty chair at the head of the table. Dad's chair, which we'd kept exactly as it was. Should we say grace? Linda asked. It was a new tradition for her, this gratitude ritual she'd started after getting out of therapy. We held hands around the table, and Linda's voice was steady as she spoke. We're thankful for this food, this house, and this family. We're thankful for second chances and the strength to take them. And we're thankful for the people who aren't here anymore but whose love still guides us. Amen, we said together. During dinner, Emma talked about her college plans. Sophie shared stories from her new school, and Marcus updated us on foundation business. Normal family conversation, the kind I'd dreamed about during those long nights in Afghanistan. After dessert, Sophie pulled out a small wrapped package. I made something for the house, she said shyly. For the living room. Inside was a wooden frame, hand-carved with surprising skill for someone her age. The photo inside showed all of us from Thanksgiving. Linda laughing at something Marcus had said. Emma rolling her eyes at one of my bad jokes. Sophie grinning with pie filling on her nose. Me looking more relaxed than I had in years. I took a woodworking class, Sophie explained. Figured I should learn to build things instead of just watching them get torn down. I hung the picture on the mantel, right next to Dad's bronze star and Mom's wedding portrait. 3 generations of Mitchell family history, plus the people who'd chosen to become part of our story. As everyone was getting ready to leave, Sophie lingered in the doorway. Mr. Jim, can I ask you something? Shoot, kiddo. Do you think people can really change? I mean, completely change who they are? I thought about Tony. rotting in federal prison, still believing he was the victim of his own story. Then I looked at Sophie, 13 years old and determined to spend her life helping people instead of hurting them. I think people can choose who they want to become, I said. Every day we get to choose. Your father made his choices. Now you get to make yours. She nodded solemnly, then brightened. Next week, can we work on that vegetable garden you promised? Spring's coming, and Mrs. Hernandez says I have a green thumb. Absolutely. Your grandfather would have loved that. He always said the best things grow from good soil and patient tending. After everyone left, I sat on the front porch where Dad used to smoke his evening pipe. The streetlights were coming on, and I could hear kids playing basketball in the Kowalski's driveway next door. Normal neighborhood sounds, the kind that meant all was right with the world. My phone buzzed. Text from Sarah, who'd been promoted to head a new cybercrime unit in D.C. Saw the news article about the foundation. Henry would be proud. How's retirement treating you? I typed back. Not retired, just shifted missions. From protecting the country to protecting the family. Same mission, different battlefield. I looked through the window at Linda washing dishes, humming something that might have been Mom's favorite hymn. At the photo on the mantel showing faces filled with hope instead of fear. At the house that had survived war, betrayal, and violence to become a home again. Same mission, I replied. Same values, just finally fighting for the right things. The porch light flickered on automatically, sensor activated by the approaching darkness. Inside, I could hear Linda talking to Emma about college applications, their voices mixing with the sound of late-night television and the settling sounds of an old house full of new memories. Home. Not just a building, not just a piece of property to be bought and sold, but a place where people who'd been broken could come together and heal. Dad had been right all along, it really was the Mitchell Fortress. But he'd been wrong about one thing. It wasn't built from wood and nails and concrete. It was built from choice and love, and the decision to stand together when everything else fell apart. And that was something no one could ever take away from us again.